Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michael. I'm going to be your host for this afternoon's session. It's session 3 of our report design series of webinars that we've been running, just to try and really familiarize you with the report design and see what it can do. So introducing you to the basics and maybe giving you some food for thought and point you in the right direction if you need to make changes. Now, today's session, we're looking at tables and variables. So starting to look at how that information is pulled on your report, where that comes from. Now we'll start with a little bit of housekeeping just before we do get started with the webinar. So as normal, if you have a microphone, it will be muted automatically. You can't talk to us during the session. Any questions, you just need to pop them into the questions panel. To access that, you just need to click your little icon on your taskbar. It's the one that looks like a speech bubble. Give it a click. You'll then have access to the box in the bottom right-hand corner. So that's where you can engage with us and submit your questions and your comments. So keep them coming throughout the session. We're joined today by Abby, Andy, Jackie, and Tina, and Tim. And they'll be on hand throughout the session just to try and support you with those questions that you have. So you may get a link to maybe one of our help articles. It may be if it's a bit more complex, I encourage you to submit your query online to our support team. Maybe it's just a case of you trying it within your software, maybe encouraging that a little bit. Or maybe there's a recording already available on a particular area that you need a little bit of assistance with. So we'll try and pick up as many of those questions as we can. If anyone wants a copy of today's slides, we've got 2 versions of those available, just as usual. So there's a standard coloured copy, and then there's the print-friendly copy with the colour stripped out. So do take the opportunity during this session to download those if you want them. However, as normal sort of disclaimer, there's virtually no detail on there. There's a few links. It is just a copy of the slides. If you want the detailed information, it's available from our help center, and we'll be touching on the help center and getting you using that a little bit in today's session. Right, okay. Let's have a look at what we'll just cover the report design webinars just before we do start. So if it's your first one with us, you may already be familiar with report design. You maybe thought, well, actually sessions 1 and 2 a bit too basic for what I'm after. So we're really starting to get stuck into the report designer from this session onwards. So we're looking at session 3. We repeated session 1 this morning. Session 2 is repeated tomorrow. Today, obviously, new topic, tables and variables. Session 4 will be tomorrow afternoon, and then 5 and 6 will take place next week. If you haven't yet registered, watch out for your follow-up emails, and it will include the links that you require. Right, this is what we're going to be covering in this session today. So a little bit of an introduction to tables and variables. We'll then just get stuck into a handful of demonstrations showing you different aspects of that. I've got a hands-on task in the middle of that as well. So getting you to find the correct variable to pull certain information onto your layouts or reports. So watch out for that section. Just in case you're drifting off or you get interrupted, we'll bring you back on board and try and engage with us a little bit at that point. We'll be looking at editing a layout, sort of how it's pretty much the same as editing a report as far as variables are concerned. And then we're going to pick up on probably the more complex aspect of variables, and it's the transaction variable. So I've got a bit of an example. So it's more of a little bit of a, I suppose, a little bit of a warning when you start adding transaction information onto your reports or your layouts. So what kind of thing to watch out for. Just at the end there, we'll explain more about the additional support, so covering a recap on the Help Center a little bit. Again, reminding you of those report design webinars that we've got coming up. We've started to make the recordings available now as well, so sessions 1 and 2, if you've missed those recordings are available. And we'll be adding today's session on, and there should be a link included on your follow-up email for that one as well. But just to remind you what's coming up, and then we'll open up to Q&A at that point as well. But keep your questions coming. We'll try and answer as many of those as we can. We'll try our best, but it is a very busy session. Over 200 of you logged in this afternoon. So some sessions, when they're a little bit more complex, we tend to get a few more questions. But keep them coming. We'll try our best. Right, so a little bit of an introduction to the report designer and also tables and variables as well. So If you've not really touched the report design side of this software before, it's a very powerful tool, and it can feel a little bit daunting when you first get into it. So we have broken the webinar series down into what I think is sort of bite-sized pieces to introduce you to that area. But the report design enables you to create and amend reports and layouts in Sage 50 accounts. Now, variables themselves are used to get information from your data, such as dates, addresses, values, into your reports and layouts. So pulling that information out of the likes of your customer records or even your own company information, getting that onto the report in the position that you've selected as well. Now, variables are also known, I'll probably refer to them as variables, but these days, I suppose it's what you would term a data field. So you'll hear sort of, if I remember, I'll try and refer to them as both, but generally I'll probably be calling them variables just because of the length of time I've been using Sage. Now, your variables are basically grouped into what you would term named tables. So there will be a table for your company information. There will be a table for your customer information. So pulling that information that you can pull from the customer record. And we'll see these as we work through the demonstration today. But each table will contain related information of particular type. So if you think about your different ledgers, there will be one for customers, there'd be one for your suppliers. So that's the type of thing that your tables exist. And then each table obviously just got those list of variables within it. Now each variable in that table is going to contain one piece of information. And that's what we're going to be looking at in today's session. So again, just to almost like introduce you to them and show you how you can find them, just in case you look at a report and think, well, actually, I need that information on my report. So sometimes it can be quite easy to do that, just to quickly edit your report or layout and pop a variable on to pull that extra bit of information through. Right, let's have a look at what we're going to be covering in the demonstration. So we'll get stuck into the demonstrations. And again, any questions along the way, anything you're not sure of, do let us know, do engage with us. But we're going to start with editing a report just to get the feel of tables and variables. So I'm going to switch across to my screen. We'll get into Sage 50 accounts. Now, I'm actually going to be using version 30 this afternoon. Now, if you're on an older version, it doesn't really matter. It's going to look pretty much the same for what we're covering today, if not exactly the same. So to start with, what we're going to do is I'm going to go into customers, and then we'll pop into reports. And we'll start with something very basic. So I'm just going to go into the customer details. I'm going to, rather than I do have it flagged as a favorite, my customer list, but just in case you want to follow through, maybe watching the recording, if you have a bit of a recap, we're just going to go into the customer details folder, and then I'm going to select the customer list. So it's a very basic report. If I just quickly preview that first of all, I'll just accept all of the defaults there. And as you can see on this report, it is just a list of customers. So it's got some basic information at the top. It's got my company name, Sage Demos. It's got the name of the report. It's got some criteria that were specified, date and time, page number, and then it's got basic customer information on there. So what we're going to do is we're going to edit this report. So with it selected, I'll click Edit at the top. And if you attended session 2 as well, you'd be familiar with selecting a layout and going into edit. It might be something you've even dabbled with in the past as well. So this is what my report looks like. This is the design of the report within the Sage Report Designer. Now, at the top of the report, so most of these boxes, some of them will be text, some of them maybe expressions, but the majority of them, these boxes that you can see, will be what you would term a variable. So if I just hover over at the top here where it says name, and you'll see we get a little floating box pop up. So I'll just do that again. I'll try and leave my mouse still so it stays on the screen. And it tells me in that information box, let's bring it up again, it says variable and then it says company.name. And that's the syntax for or the format, to put it in simple terms, for a variable when it appears on a report or layout. So a table name followed by variable name. So in this case, if I just hover again, it's saying company, which is the table name, and then full stop, and then the actual name of the variable itself. So in this case, name at the top, it's the name of the variable. It's going to pull through my company name from within settings, company preferences, and that name field. If we look at the next one down, it's a variable specific to the report itself. So it's report.name. And if we we'll toggle between the preview and the design mode at the bottom as well, just using this little icon on the bottom. So that one at the top, just okay that again. So that was the one that was company.name. So that's pulling through my company name, which in my case, my demo company that I'm using here, I'll just call it Sage Demos. Now, in addition to the tables on your reports itself, we've got some additional tables as well. So there's things like your reporting table, which is, it's going to pull through things like your date and time. So if we just hover over that one, you'll see it says report.date. We've got report.page, etc. We can see just by sort of hovering over it which table and what the variable is actually called. And this sort of section here, we've got some variables which relate to when we've run the report, so the criteria that we specified. So we've got that showing on as well. But if we have a look at the main body of the report, so I just hover over this where it says account reference in the A/C column, we've got the variable here, and that tells me it's sales ledger dot account reference. So sales ledger being the table, and the account ref being the variable. Now, how many variables from the sales ledger? So from the customer record, how many different bits of information or how many variables do you think there are? So if you think about the customer record, how many bits of boxes, company name, reference, address boxes, contact names, email addresses, how many do you think there are? If you want to have a guess, pop a guess in the questions panel. So just pop a number in. So how many do you think different bits of information we'd be able to pull through from the customer record onto our report? So do you think it's 50 bits of different information? 100? More? So we'll just wait and see if we get some guesses. So Sharon, you're plowing straight in there with 400. Loads of various bits. I'm going to show you this in a minute as well, so you can appreciate how many there actually are. I'll see if I get someone that's really close. Now, this isn't verified, but I had a quick guess of it myself. I counted them up, and I counted 172. So just in the sales ledger alone, we're not talking about transaction information. I'm just talking about information that you can pull through from the customer record. So 172 different variables. Now, the ones that you will have available and are usable to you will vary depending a little bit. It depends on your things like the variant of Sage Accounts and also the version of Sage Accounts as well. So it may differ slightly. So for instance, older versions, you only had 3 email addresses. On the recent versions, you got 6. Similar for the things like the analysis fields as well. So you could put up earlier versions, you had 3 analysis fields, meaning you'd pull that potentially onto your report or your layout. These days, it's 6. Right, so let's have a quick look at adding a data field as well. So let's say we want to put some information on. So let's say on this report, and I appreciate there are reports which will show what I'm about to cover and things like, so let's say we want to add the credit limit to this specific report. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a bit of space on this report. So I'll highlight email here on the end, just click it to highlight it. Now press delete, and I'll get rid of the title as well. So the bit of text in the sort of header section. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert the credit limit just in this sort of space. That's where I want it. So to do that, and there are a couple of methods to do this as well. Let's start with the first one. So the first one on your toolbar at the top, so this toolbar here, we've got an option, add data field. So I did mention earlier, sometimes we refer to variables as data fields. So we click add data field. And then all we need to do is move the mouse approximately where we want to insert that data field. So just give it a click. And then it's going to give me a list of tables. Now, the one I'm after, credit limit, that's information that can be pulled through from the customer's record. So this one here, sales ledger. So we expand that, and then what we're looking for is credit limit. Now, this can be half the problem as well, finding the right name for the data field. We'll come on to that a little bit later on. So what we're after, nice simple one, credit limit. Now I can either scroll down, I could press C on the keyboard and it would jump down a little bit, but I just scroll down, it's pretty near the top, this one. We highlight credit limit, and then I click OK. And you can see it pops it onto the list here for me. Now I can move that around, I can format it. We'll come back to that maybe in a little while when we get a bit further. I'll just change some of that formatting so it looks like the rest of it. Now, if I click off that, that's the credit limit inserted. And if I just hover over it, you'll see the information box that comes up, says variable sales ledger, which was the table we expanded. And then it says after that, credit limit. Now I could put a title in there. I'm not too concerned with putting things like titles in, etc. today. Just want to show you how you can insert the variables and help you to understand that. So let's just repeat that process. I'll just delete it for the time being. So all we did was we clicked add data field. You click approximately where you want to insert that variable. It's brought up essentially the tables list, and it was in sales ledger. So this is the list what I asked you for earlier. So how many did you think there was in the sales ledger? So as we can see, they're in alphabetical order as well. So we got things like, just having a quick look here, we've got things like account reference, we've got address variables, you've got the analysis fields, things like average paydays, the balance on the account, bank account information if you want to pull that through. There's different address types as well. So you've got what you term a compact address. So loads of variables in there. As I say, they're all in alphabetical order. If anyone's quick, you might be able to scroll down that list if you're following me through and say, well, actually, there's not as many as you said, or there's a slightly more than what you said a moment ago. I think I said 172. So anyone wants to count them just to verify that, you're more than welcome. Anyway, we'll go back to choose credit limit again. So we'll select that one and just OK that, and it pops it onto the report for me. Now, if I just preview it at that point, so this little preview option at the bottom, just accept all of that criteria, and you can see, obviously I haven't got a title in there, but it's pulled the credit limit through. So potentially it can sometimes be that easy just to add a quick data field onto your report to pull additional information. It's a bit like if you're editing your layout, which we're going to touch on a little bit later. If you need more information, either your own company information or additional information such as things like payment terms, you want that to be pulled through from the customer's record. So sometimes it can be quite easy just to add that little bit of extra information. Now, just going back to the designer view, and I'll just kind of knock that back off again. And I don't think I've seen the question yet, but there's bound to be someone that will come into here and say, actually, I haven't got that toolbar at the top. So you might come in and you might think, well, actually, mine looks like this. So what happens if I haven't got that? Well, first of all, you can right click on just a blank part of the toolbar and you can switch to Toolbox Basic back on so that you do have them. You've got that Add Data Field option. And also you can go into the Toolbox menu and you've got them on there as well. So again, I could choose Add Data Field, just give it a click and then click where I want to insert that. And we've got the data fields listed at that point. Let's just cancel that. Quick question is, I see Jackie picking that one up actually. Quick question saying, is there any way of knowing where variables are located? So things like credit limit being in the sales ledger, going to come onto that one, James. So we're going to be touching that on that in the demos. Got a bit of a hands-on task for you so you can get used to that and find out what table you need and also what the variable's called. So watch out for that one. We'll pick that up in a few minutes time. Now, the other option that you do have for adding a variable is you may have this displayed at the side here. You've got the variables panel. Now, it will show you the tables essentially that are applicable to your report. So if I was editing a supplier report, for instance, it's not going to give me access to the sales ledger. It's going to say a purchase ledger. So it will give me all of the variables that would essentially be linked to this type of report or layout, depending on what you're amending. So this variables panel, it's the same as me where I've clicked Add Data Field and then I've clicked onto the layout. So I can just click it, expands it. I can sort of leave it so it's open as well, clicking this little pin icon. So it means it's open constantly if you're maybe going to add a few of them, or you can just leave it where it will automatically collapse. So if we do the same thing, so sales ledger gives me a big list. Again, if I just go for credit limit, this time I would find it. If I double click it, and it will pop it onto the report for me. Now, if I was to do a few of those, and obviously this is just it's just quite a, so it's essentially on this report, it's one line per customer. But let's say I wanted to pop on a not contact name, let's choose something else. Let's choose, say, that's what we're going to choose. So let's choose address line 1 as well. So if I double click that one, you'll see what it does, it automatically increases the size of that section as well. Now, if I just preview that one so you could see what that one looked like, and you'll see we've sort of got address information wrapped down. So you might find that if you're using that method, that you may not need to start moving things around. So concentrating on the alignment, maybe reducing the width of certain fields, etc. We'll just knock that one back off. We'll just reduce the size of that back up to where we were. And then if I just quickly preview it again, and we can see it's almost back to where it was. Now, if you can't see that, if we just switch back to Designer View, if you can't see this variables panel, so if I just knock it off, get rid of it. If I go to the View menu, there's an option called Variables. So if I click that, it switches it back on. Generally, what you will find is that it's collapsed to the side there. So these are your tables. So if we look at the company information, for instance, so company information relates to my company's information. So that's that company.name. So it's pulling my company name onto the list there. So we just go back to it and have a look at the company one. So we got things like where we can pull our own address through. Other information as well, business type. There's other address options. There's delivery addresses we can pull through, country codes, delivery information. So again, lots of variables in there as well. Again, keep your questions coming. I see you've kept my colleagues busy already, so we'll try and keep up to speed with those. Now, if we go to just to variables, let's knock credit limit back off, and we go back to variables, and you will have this option the find option at the top. You have this if you use add data field and click as well. But if we go into variables and I just type, I'll start typing, it'll try and find and narrow down that list. Let's just widen that a bit so you can see it. So based on what we've keyed in at the top, it will narrow it down. So if you do know what a particular variable is called, then sometimes that can make it a little bit quicker. Quick question from Nicola there, just in case you want to have a go. So Nicola's just asking there, how could I practice on some of the reports without altering the original, i.e. make a copy? What you'll find, Nicola, is something we covered in session 2 as well with when we amend layouts. Well, let's just collapse that. What you can do is, it just literally, what you'll find is you can't, if you make amends to a standard report, a bit like I have, I can't then go and just save it. What I've got to do is click Save As. So I've got to save it with an alternative file name. So I can play around with my reports as much as I need to. So essentially that's what you'd be doing. So it means you can experiment with the report design and learn more about it, but it won't allow you to overwrite the defaults. Therefore, they're always protected. So have a go. Right, now formatting, we just quickly pick up on that one because I think it's probably quite important when we're dealing with variables and data fields. We'll just pop that one back on. So let's just do it via the icon at the top again. So we'll click, give that one a click. We'll look for sales ledger. Again, you've got the find option at the top there, just make things a little bit quicker if you know what you're after. So we'll just select credit limit, pop that in. Now, format-wise, if you want to ensure it's the same, what you can do is just, if I click onto the likes of telephone here, for instance, and I can see, oh, we'll choose contact name, and we've got a format at the top, but you can change it to whatever you want. You can also drag it round as well. So if I just, alignment wise, I can drag it, I can move it. Maybe it's too wide, so maybe I want to make it a bit narrower. So we can do all of that type of thing. And obviously you can change fonts and styles and whether you want it in bold or underlined or in italics. So loads of scope there to personalize your reports a little bit. Now, as I mentioned, different ledgers reports are linked to different tables. So for the time being, I'm just going to close out of this one. And if we close out of customers reports, and we pop into suppliers, just as an example, and pop into reports. And again, we'll choose a very basic one. So supplier details, the equivalent supplier list. We select it, click edit. And this time, if we go to view, variables, you'll see the tables that we have available. So rather than the sales ledger this time, we've got one purchase ledger. So we're wanting it potentially to pull information onto our report from our suppliers list. Now, I don't think there's as many variables within the purchase ledger table, but again, there's loads in there. There's loads of information that potentially you could pull through onto your reports. So pretty much the same, but obviously pulling information from elsewhere. Now, obviously, you may find that variables they have the same name in different tables. So things like credit limit, scroll down. So once you've learned it in one area, it's pretty much intuitive that it's going to be called essentially the same in the other table. So just make it a little bit easier. Now, going back to the question from earlier, and it was from James. So James's question was, is there any way of knowing where the variables are located? So if I want to pop some information on there, how do I know what the variable is called? So this is where, if possible, I would like to get you involved. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you how to access a specific article in our help center. So if you want to do this and maybe follow along with the hands-on task as well. All you need to do is open your browser and head into sage.co.uk/help. So that will take you to our help center. You may have a shortcut set up for accessing that as well. And we just choose Sage 50 accounts. And it takes us to this page. Now, all I'm going to do is search in the search box. I'm just going to type tables and variables. And there's an article here, tables and variables used by Report Designer. So I'm going to give that a click. Now, there's a little bit of a disclaimer on this one because this is quite an old resource now. It's been around for a long time. Still a useful resource, but it is based on the appearance of an older version of, in fact, a couple of older versions of Sage 50 accounts. So we've requested it to be updated. We're just waiting for that to happen. But I'm going to show you this one. So just linking in with that question from earlier. So if you want to find something, you've got this area here. So let's say a customer's account reference. I want to find out what that table is and what the variable would be called. So if I just click onto customers on this image here, and then I can see the account references. And if I just hover the mouse over it, I get a little floating box. So it says sales ledger, which is the table name, and then account reference. So if I was to run a report and it was to include that A1 design services, if I've got that variable there, it would pull through A1D001. Similar for the customer's name, for instance. So sales ledger being the table, name being the variable. So it's a great resource to help you find out. So if you know what the bit of information is in the software that you want to use, you want to pull through onto the report, you can just navigate to it. So have a go. I'm going to go back to the slides for a moment. And I'm going to bring up a little bit of a hands-on task if you are wanting to have a go. So finding the right variable. So use that Help Center article. You can find it. In fact, what I'll do is I'll quickly pop a link to it. We'll pop that into the chat panel for you. So I'll just copy that. I'll pop it into the chat panel. So you should just be able to access the chat panel via task down the side. And then if you just give it a click, it should take you to the right article. What I'd like you to do is have a little play with that one. So see if you can find the variable for the customer account balance, the supplier VAT registration number. So it's just a case of using that article and navigating to it. And when you hover over the relevant information, it should tell you the table name and the variable name. But quite often we'll get that type of query. I can see this information in the customer record or the supplier record or on an invoice, but how do I get that information? What's the name of the data field or variable? So have a bit play with that. So see if you can find the customer account balance, the supplier VAT registration number, an invoice due date, and maybe something like the transaction extra reference. Now, the transaction extra reference, I'm going to run through a demonstration of that one in just a moment as well, because that's quite a common thing when it comes to transactional based reports where you want to see details of invoices and receipts, payments, etc. It's quite a common one where people would like that added to a report. For those of you that are just sitting twiddling your thumbs and you aren't joining in with that hands-on task, what I'll do is I'll quickly share my screen as well, and I'll just quickly show you that as well. So I'll quickly share it. I'm still in that article. So first one on the list there was the customer account balance. So we're in customers. You can see the balance column. I just hover over it and it tells me I'd be able to pull that information through from the sales ledger table, and it's just called balance. It's quite an obvious one. We try to keep them quite intuitive. Next one, supplier VAT registration number. Now, when you're on here, we've got a couple of options for you. You can either you find that you need to scroll across, or the other thing you can do, in this case, I can just go straight to suppliers, or if you need to, you can just press F6. It'll reload the, depending on your browser, it should reload it for you. So anyway, we'll go to suppliers. Now the VAT registration number isn't on the initial screen, so we just need to go into a record, and then we can see the VAT registration number. So again, if we just hover over it, and it's telling us it's the purchase ledger table, and the variable itself, it's just called VAT reg number. So again, nice, easy one. What about the invoice due date? So if we pop invoice into invoices and credits, I'll just choose new invoice, and we can see the due on date here. Just hover over it. It tells us, in this case, it's the invoice table. So whatever's before the dot in the middle of that. So invoice, and then it would be called payment due date. So if we were to run either an invoice layout or maybe a report, and we want to include that, we just need to insert that variable onto the report itself. And then the last one I wanted to cover on that was on the slide was the transaction extra reference. So if we go into transactions, we can just, if we scroll across, see if we can do that. We can see the extra reference column. Nothing in it in this example, but there is still the field. So the extra ref, or the XREF, it's telling me it's on the table audit split and the extra ref. So loads of questions coming through. Where do you find the discount table for this, and what variable is that? Have a go of that. Have a go of it. Just a case of navigating through into the relevant area and then hovering over the relevant field, and it should tell you the table and the variable name. Now, if I do just pop back to the slides for a moment, I've included a link on the slide. So if you've downloaded that, although it's nice and easy to find, I've included a link to that tables and variables article. So hopefully, as I say, great resource, that one as well. Right, what we'll quickly do, we've got two areas left to cover. So we're going to quickly have a look at a layout this time. So back to my screen, share my desktop. A few questions coming through, probably a bit more too advanced for what we're covering today. So couple of questions, and I've seen this. How do you link tables together? We're not covering that in this session today. If you look in the Help Center for the Join Editor, it will bring up the more advanced features for you. So just do a search for that one. I think Chetan, yours was the last question there about linking tables. So if you look for that in our Help Center, then it should provide the information that you're after. Right, anyway, back to my screen. We're going to close out of reports. We'll go into invoices and credits. I'll just highlight an invoice, doesn't really matter which one. Into print, choose the layouts folder. And if I just choose a layout, it doesn't really matter which one it is, so we'll just choose that one. Click edit at the top. Again, it'll open the design of the layout in this case. It'll open that in the report designer. And again, I've got the variables panel still open. You've got the same options. So add a data field. You may have seen that one in session 2 when we run that one. And again, it would be exactly the same options available. It's just you're applying it to a layout rather than a report. So really no difference. Let's close out of that one. Now, the last area I really want to cover with you today, and I think it's quite important if you are going to talk about variables, we need to talk about transaction variables. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to pop into my customers. And I've got a customer set up here. So this 2B customer. And I'm going to have a quick look at the activity. Now, for this customer, we've got 2 transactions. So we've got 2 invoices listed. So reference 124 and reference 125. Now if we highlight the top one, you'll see in the bottom box, it's only got one item on it. Now you might be familiar with the way transactions group based on, when you've looked at bank payments before. Invoices on customers' accounts or invoices on supplier accounts, pretty much the same the way it groups. So if we highlight the second one, we can see on invoice 125, we've actually got 3 items. So I've given them the extra reference, item 1, item 2, item 3, just to make the next part of the demonstration quite obvious. Now, generally grouping works if you're in a, obviously if you're on invoices and credits and you enter an invoice and it's got multiple items, it will automatically group that transaction as you update it to your ledgers. If you're working in the bank payment screen, however, as long as you enter the transactions on the same screen at the same time, they must be consecutive on the list. And as long as the transactions use the same bank account, date, and reference, it will group those transactions together. For batch invoices and credits, pretty much the same. Just close out for a second. We went into a batch invoice screen. If we were to enter a number of items on a batch invoice or a batch credit screen, as long as they're on the same screen, they're consecutive on the list, they're posted to the same customer, they have the same date and same reference, then when we save that, it will group the transactions together. So a bit like what we've got, if we just go back to that activity window, have a quick look at it. You can see we've got that one which is just a single item on it, but the second one has the 3 items on it. Now, some reports you view will just show what we term the header information, where it's grouped together. So you would see one invoice, but adding up to the 3 items. Other reports, depending where it's pulling that information from, it will show the breakdown, what we term the split information. So the individual item lines. So I wanted to cover this just so that almost almost like a be careful, a word of warning when you are editing reports and you're adding transactional variables onto your report. So just remember this one, we've got 2 what we would term header transactions, so 2 main invoices, but the second one has that breakdown, the 3 items within it. So with this customer selected, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into reports. We'll choose the customer activity. And there's 2 I'm going to look at. First of all, I'm going to start with the customer activity summary. So if we just preview that report so you can see it first of all, I'll just accept all the defaults. And you can see on this one, it's summary information. Let's zoom in so you can see that a little bit clearer. So in this instance, we can see both transactions. So we got one line. That second one, that reference 125, it's got the 3 parts. So adding up to £360 in total. Now, if we edit this report, which we'll quickly do, you can see the design of it. And if we just come on to this sort of detail section, if we hover our mouse pointer over the variables, you'll see that the box pops up and it says audit header, tran number. So all of these variables in this sort of detail section are what you would term audit header information, or it's using variables from the audit header. So when we're looking at the activity, it's equivalent of that information in that top box. We just close out of that and we'll quickly have a look at the detailed report. So the customer activity detailed, this one at the top. If we preview that one, again, just accept all of the criteria. And this time on this report, it's actually pulling a different level of information. So this time it's pulling it from the audit split. So I can see the individual parts of invoices 124, which was just the one line. And we've got the 3 items for invoice 125. So again, it depends on the level of information or the level of detail that you want on there. Right. Now, the key is when you're editing reports is not to mix the variables from the tables. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go back to the summary report. So this is the one that showed you just the top level. It showed me one line for 124 and one line for 125. Now, if I edit that edit the report, sorry, to take me into the design view, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make that section just that little bit bigger. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add in the extra reference variable. So if we just hover over these variables first of all, you can see these were the ones that all say audit header. Now, the extra reference is actually recorded at audit split level. Now, if I go into the audit split table and I look for extra reference, so there it is, and I can drag that or double click it, and I'm just going to pop it beneath the details. So I've got the extra reference there. So what I've now got is I've got top level information, audit header information, but I've also got some information that's going to be pulled through from the individual item line. And this is where sometimes you can get into a bit of a muddle. So I'm going to show you what that looks like when I preview it. What we've now got for that second customer is we've got information that's being repeated. So for that first invoice that had the single item, 124, it's only on there once. But because for the second item, so invoice 125, it had the 3 parts, usually on this report, it would just add them all together. It would show the top level information. So £360 in total. But because we've included the extra reference and it's different on each of the lines in this instance, it's actually repeated the information 3 times. So we've got 3 times in total. And obviously that not only impacts on what's showing, but it also impacts on the total as well. So we've got the 120, we've got 360, 360, 360, because we're pulling header information through, but we're also pulling through individual item line information. So what I'm trying to get across is do be careful when you're pulling transactional information back through. If I just knock that one back off, so we've got audit header information only at this stage. Preview it again. And we'll back this section here. If I just zoom in a bit so you can see that. Scroll down as well so you can see it. Oh, a bit too far. Oh, having a nightmare with my mouse there. Let's just use the scroll bar. So we're now back to just the top level information only. So do be careful if you're going to start amending reports. Do check out, maybe make sure you've done it right by checking just an account that's got next to nothing on it, just to make it a bit more obvious. Just close out of that one. Right, now that brings us to the end of the demos for variables. So hopefully that's given you a little flavor, giving you a little bit of an insight into tables and variables. That's all we're really trying to achieve here, just to try and point you in the right direction, give you some food for thought and some ideas, just in case maybe you think, actually, yeah, that report, I would just want things like the extra reference on there, or if it's a customer report, I just need that extra bit of information. So maybe give it a go, have a try. Right, okay, brings us to the end of the demos anyway. If you've got any final questions, I think we're just about up to speed with all the, I think just about all of the questions so far have been answered, so hopefully you've spotted yours. Right, okay, if you've got any final questions, just give you a couple of minutes to get them entered and we'll try and get an answer to you. Remember, you will receive that email later today containing links so you can register for the future webinars. And if you need a bit of a recap, you'll be able to watch recordings as well. So Help Center, loads of great resources in there, such as that tables and variables article. There is a section dedicated to layouts and reports though, so do check that out as well. I've included the link on there, just so you can get to it nice and easy if you have downloaded the handout. Remember, we're running a series of 6 different topics for Report Designer, again, to introduce you to the various areas. Tomorrow afternoon at 2, we are running the expressions option. So if you want things like learn about multiplying figures together on your reports, that type of thing. So come along, get yourself signed up for that one. That will be repeated next week as well at 11 o'clock on, I think it's Thursday next week, the expressions one will be repeated. So if you haven't yet registered, please do so. A link will be included on your follow-up email. Adrian, you were just asking there, will we be covering things like the layout of sections and things like that within the header bar, that type of thing? I'm not sure how in depth we're going to go to that, but we will be covering things like sections, etc., within your reports. Again, we're not going too in depth in these sessions. Most people that will be attending them may have dabbled with Report Designer or maybe have never used them before. They're more in-depth queries. That you can submit those types of questions to our support team. Anyway, let me quickly thank you for coming along today. I hope you have enjoyed it and you found it useful. If you can take a minute to complete the survey, that should pop up as you leave today. It'd be greatly appreciated. We love reading those comments, whether we've hit the mark or not. I appreciate some of you, and we've found this in some of the other surveys as well. Some of you are expecting them to be really in depth. Have a good look through the descriptions of the webinars. They're not intended to be in-depth webinars. If you want more advanced features, we're not really covering webinars for those just yet. But if you'd like that, let us know, pop it on the survey, just so we've got an idea of what you'd like to see covered going forward. And we'll see if we can maybe do that in the future. Your follow-up email will be with you in around about an hour's time. So if you haven't yet registered for the other sessions, loads of other topics as well, whether it's version 30, bank feeds. We've got loads of sessions coming up on VAT as well. Get yourself registered for them. So if you want to feel confident with your VAT, we cover things like reconciling your return, submitting it online, running reports to help you check your figures, etc. Get yourself signed up for those as well. Right, we'll end the webinar just at that point. Many thanks for coming along. Apologies for the slight overrun. Hopefully we'll see you on the other sessions as well. Many thanks.